Welcome to In Search of Heaven's Gate, an exploration of the history, beliefs, and practices of the Heaven's Gate movement. This is Episode 1, Heaven's Gate and the Big Questions, an overview of their essential beliefs. Heaven's Gate was a religious movement founded in the 1970s by a music teacher named Marshall Applewhite and a registered nurse named Bonnie Nettles. Together, they developed an eclectic belief system that borrowed elements from a variety of other existing traditions, including Christianity, Eastern philosophy, New Age spirituality, and UFO mythology. Over the course of 2 decades, the Heaven's Gate religion attracted relatively few followers and garnered only minimal attention from academics, the media, and the general public. However, in 1997, Heaven's Gate would become a household name when 39 believers in the movement brought an end to their lives, having come to believe that a spaceship piloted by an advanced race of extraterrestrials would collect their souls and bring them to a higher plane of existence known as the next level. Since then, the story of Heaven's Gate has attracted immense interest from sociologists, psychologists, journalists, and plenty of people who are curious to know. Just what was it that led these individuals to give up their lives for such an unusual set of beliefs? On the other hand, some are interested not in what sets the beliefs of Heaven's Gate apart from those of other, perhaps more socially accepted religions, but rather what might make them similar, perhaps even similar to beliefs that many of us hold ourselves. Within the broader discourse which has converged around the Heaven's Gate movement over the last quarter century, the details of their actual belief system have received comparatively less attention than the more disturbing and bizarre aspects of the group's history. Many popular documentaries tend to focus their attention on the leaders of the movement, devoting less time to studying the lives and beliefs of their followers. On the other hand, a number of respected academics present this group as a classic case of brainwashing, a rather controversial subject within psychology in and of itself. Now, these and other approaches taken by Heaven's Gate researchers are, of course, perfectly legitimate viewpoints. Every perspective offered has its place within the broader project of studying the history and fate of these individuals. But one of the most frequent questions I've been asked is the following: what exactly did Heaven's Gate believe? And what's surprising about this is that oftentimes, the individuals who have asked this question have already read or viewed a number of materials related to Heaven's Gate, including podcasts, articles, and documentary films. And yet many people still come away from these wondering, what was Heaven's Gate all about? To that end, I've tried to develop an overview of the most essential beliefs adhered to by followers of Heaven's Gate, with the hope that this approach will be of benefit to others who are interested in gaining a better understanding of how the Heaven's Gate belief system operated. Having a grasp of their basic beliefs about the world and about themselves will place us in a better position to understand what might have motivated these believers to live and to die in the way that they did. Today, I'll be focusing on those beliefs which pertained to the following. First, we'll look at the cosmology of the Heaven's Gate movement, which is to say, their ideas about the origin and purpose of the world, as well as that of the human species. From here, we'll examine the religion's soteriology, or salvation doctrine, essentially what they took to be the basic problem faced by human beings, and the solution to this problem that their religion prescribed. At last, we'll arrive at the eschatology of Heaven's Gate, or end times doctrine. In other words, the way they conceptualized the destiny of the world they inhabited, and by extension, the fate of themselves and the rest of the human species. We will find that all 3 of these components turn on one another. They are distinct, yet closely related. Together, they structure and inform the beliefs adhered to and the practices undertaken not only by followers of Heaven's Gate, but in fact, the followers of many religions. By the end of this study, we should have a clear picture of how the Heaven's Gate movement strove to answer some of the most pressing questions asked by almost every human being at one time or another. Where did we come from? why are we here, and where are we going? In some senses, Heaven's Gate is not so different from other, more mainstream religions. It posits an account of how our species and the world we inhabit came into being. It identifies our basic problems as human beings, an explanation of how those problems came about, and offers a solution to those problems. And finally, it attempts to outline what will happen to the world and to us at the end of time, or at the very least, at the end of a particular period of time. These are all common features of most, if not all, religions. Of course, in plenty of other respects, Heaven's Gate was a unique expression of the religious impulse, one that evolved out of a specific historical and cultural context, and one which carried with it certain practices and customs that many find to be rather extreme, even when compared to those of other religious systems. Before we turn our attention to the Heaven's Gate belief system specifically, let's unpack these more basic assumptions that are common to most, if not all, religious systems. In this way, we'll have a good foundation for interpreting what makes Heaven's Gate distinct from other religions, as well as what might make it similar. And we'll focus on three specific categories of religious belief: cosmology, soteriology, and eschatology. In religion, cosmology refers to a person's beliefs about the origin and fate of the world and themselves. It comes from the Greek cosmos, meaning the world, and logia, meaning the study of. In many cases, these beliefs inform other ideas that are central to any religion. Creation myths and origin stories very often point to whatever a given religion takes to be the basic problem faced by humans, and the solutions to those problems which the religion prescribes for believers. Thus, the cosmology of a given religion is often related to the soteriology of that religion, the study of salvation or salvation doctrine. What happens after we die, and how can we ensure that our fate will be a good one? This component in particular will inform the various practices undertaken by the followers of a given religion, since in most cases, salvation, liberation, or redemption requires something from us, whether that consists of adopting a particular attitude or belief, adhering to various rituals and rites, or refraining from certain behaviors, objects, or activities. Salvation doctrines assume that there is something wrong with the way that we think, with the way that we act, or the way in which we relate to our Creator, in the case of some religions, or the way in which we interpret reality, in the case of others. We may have fallen from a state of grace, purity, knowledge, or freedom into one of sin, corruption, ignorance, or bondage. But salvation also supposes that there is a solution to this problem. From this perspective, then, the purpose of human life is to discover the means by which we can escape our condition, whatever that happens to be, and to avail ourselves of whatever solution has been offered. Oftentimes, we find that bound up in a particular religion's concept of the origin of our world and their understanding of the purpose of human life is an account of what will happen to the world at the end of time, or at the end of a particular age. A religion which proposes to have the answer to the question, where did we come from, may also answer the question, where are we going? In some religions, the world will be brought to an end by the same deity or process which brought it into existence, with believers who have followed the teachings being saved from calamity, while those who disbelieved or failed to properly adhere to the teachings are left behind, destroyed along with the rest of the world. In other religions, the history of the world, the life of our species, and even time itself is understood to be cyclical. After the end of a particular age or eon, the world and everything in it will be destroyed, only to be regenerated all over again. For followers of Heaven's Gate, the basic problem faced by human beings is being human in and of itself. The truth, from their perspective, is that the human experience was always designed to be overcome, to be transcended. Unfortunately, however, most of us have apparently failed to recognize this. We think that the world we see is all there is, that being human is all we can ever hope to be. Those of us who hold to various religious affiliations may believe that if we follow our particular tradition, we will attain some kind of salvation or emancipation after death. But members of Heaven's Gate dispute this. It is their belief that all of the world's religions are, at best, a pale impression of the truth which Applewhite and Nettles try to convey. So what was this incredible truth that they are supposed to have stumbled upon more than 50 years ago? Beginning in 1972, Applewhite and Nettles ensconced to the woods of the Pacific Northwest to read and study various religious materials. They flipped through a number of different texts before eventually settling on the Christian Bible as the foundation for their new belief system. Through an extraordinarily unconventional reading of the Gospels and the Book of Revelations, these two individuals came to believe that Jesus of Nazareth had descended not from some ethereal heaven, but from a physical kingdom somewhere beyond our planet, one which was inhabited by an advanced race of extraterrestrial beings. The pair concluded from their readings that they themselves were also prophets from this higher realm, that they too had been incarnated for a purpose, and that their mission was to lead those who believed in them back to this world beyond the stars. After spending the next few years working out the kinks in their belief system, Applewhite and Nettles, or Bo and Peep as they wished to be called at the time, set out on a tour of the United States, searching for people who would be willing to leave everything and everyone they knew behind in order to follow them. At meetings held between 1975 and 1976, Bo and Peep, Applewhite and Nettles, T and Doe, laid out the basics of their new belief system. And that went something a little like this. First, the world and everything in it was created by members of a higher kingdom somewhere at the edge of the universe, known as the Next Level. These next-level entities are thought to be responsible for both the creation and the maintenance of the planet, and presumably other planets scattered throughout the universe. Whenever they talked about the Next Level and its relationship with our species and our planet, Applewhite and Nettles often employed agricultural terminology to help their students grasp what they were trying to convey. For example, they might use terms like garden to refer to the planet Earth, which is to say that the members of the Next Level were likened to gardeners, developing, caring for, and eventually retrieving whatever they'd planted. Every couple of thousand years or so, the Next Level recycles the Earth and harvests the minds or souls of individuals who have proven they are ready to join the Next Level and assist them with their work. In the interim, members of the human species who have missed the mark will continually reincarnate, with the assumption being that perhaps the next harvest will have a more fruitful yield. Thus, the operative question becomes, how does one prove themselves worthy of the Next Level? How do we avoid missing the mark, being passed over, when the Next Level comes to turn over the field? For those who believe in the teachings of Applewhite and Nettles, the Next Level has already developed a blueprint by which we can achieve complete freedom from the bondage of human existence. To that end, there are a few important requirements. First, one must find and follow what the movement termed a representative. Throughout history, they believe that the Next Level has sent down members of its own kingdom to come to the planet Earth in order to show people the way out of the human kingdom. It is very important, from their point of view, that a living representative be physically incarnated in order to guide believers during the course of their earthly lives and eventually to lead believers into the world beyond after they are deceased. Followers of Heaven's Gate believe that Applewhite and Nettles were two of these representatives from the Next Level. They had come from this higher plane of reality for the express purpose of teaching believers how to prepare themselves for their eventual departure from the earth, to direct them as they worked to transcend their human limitations, and to serve as a model for the type of behavior expected by beings from the Next Level. Not only must a representative be present on Earth in order for believers to be rescued from the planet's eventual destruction, an individual must also be able to recognize such a representative for who they truly are. And unfortunately, at least from their perspective, only a handful of people have ever been able to recognize their next-level representatives whenever such entities have paid us a visit. But even for those who are fortunate enough to meet such a being, and who are able to recognize this being as a next-level representative, the journey has only just begun. The next requirement for entry into this higher plane of reality after death is what members of Heaven's Gate refer to as the overcoming process. In order to prove to the next level that one is ready to join them, they must first overcome their humanness. While they are still alive, believers in Heaven's Gate endeavor to model their behavior and thoughts after those of the next level. The goal is to become less like a human and more like a member of this higher kingdom. This involves refraining from activities like smoking, drinking, and all forms of sex and sensuality. Members of the next level were thought to be sexless, genderless, and entirely free of sensual desire. Thus, in order to prepare for entry into their advanced realm, members of Heaven's Gate strove to purge themselves of all worldly diversions, including material wealth, junk food, fashionable clothes, and sensual pleasure. Overcoming one's humanness also involved reconditioning the way one thinks, such as learning to ignore negative thoughts and replace them with positive ones, and most importantly, to cease identifying with one's previous social role prior to entering the group, and even to cease identifying with one's own physical body. This latter requirement was obviously quite difficult. Every moment of every day, believers in Heaven's Gate were entombed in these bodies which their leaders were telling them were not actually their own. For that reason, Heaven's Gate developed a system of term substitution. Basically, members tried to adopt new and unusual terms for everyday objects and ideas in order to reinforce this notion that they themselves were not of this world. For example, members of Heaven's Gate routinely used terms like vehicle, Nutrilab, out-of-craft task to refer to their bodies, their kitchen, and their jobs. The aim was to disassociate one's identification with the body of a human and the roles of human society, and instead begin to identify more and more with the mind and spirit of a next-level entity. Members of the next level were thought to be highly advanced in terms of their emotional maturity and their efficiency at performing complex tasks, such as building planets and designing galaxies, and so forth. Some members of Heaven's Gate described their time in the group as a kind of job interview, during which they were constantly preparing for entry into this higher kingdom. Every move they made was regulated in very specific ways, from the time they took to shower and shave in the morning, to the way they walked and spoke, and even the way they washed and dried dishes. Mundane tasks and chores that most of us probably space out as we perform were all imbued with immense meaning and significance for members of this religion. When the earth is ready to be recycled, the next level will come to collect the individuals who have demonstrated sufficient overcoming. They will be taken on board their spacecraft, while those who have shown some progress, but perhaps not enough, will be reincarnated in order that they may continue to work on themselves with the hope that next time they will be ready. Thus, the task of our lives from this perspective seems fairly straightforward. We are born as humans, but humanity is not our birthright. It's not our destiny. From the beginning, our human condition was designed to be a transitory phase, not a permanent state of affairs. Every couple of millennia, we have the opportunity to seek out and follow a representative from the next level, the order of advanced beings who have created our species and the world we live in. We are invited to overcome our humanness and all of the suffering that comes with it in exchange for a new identity, a new body in this higher kingdom, bodies that are free of suffering and strife, which we will then be able to use to fulfill the important task of helping to manage the universe. So, where do we go from here? Well, perhaps it comes as no surprise that most people who heard these teachings found them pretty hard to believe. Of course, as a researcher of Heaven's Gate, my interest is primarily in that small group of individuals who did believe what Applewhite and Nettles told them. And if you've stuck with me this far, I'd imagine that's probably what you're interested in as well. With that said, we will want to understand how those who believed in Heaven's Gate made sense of those who did not. It's actually a really important feature of any religion, especially if that religion presents itself as the ultimate truth, which Heaven's Gate certainly does. If believers of a given religion really think that they've got the answers to those big questions I talked about at the beginning of this episode, where did we come from, why are we here, where are we going, then in most cases, those individuals will also have some explanation for why others don't recognize their beliefs as being the answer to those questions. And usually, they'll also have an account of what happens to those who don't believe. If Heaven's Gate is the way beyond all the problems of human existence, all the problems of the earthly world, as they claimed it was, then what happens to the vast majority of us who are not convinced? And that's what we'll take a look at next time. This concludes the first episode of In Search of Heaven's Gate. Thanks for listening. If you want to learn more about the work I'm doing in the area of Heaven's Gate research, you can reach me at insearchofheavensgate@gmail.com, all one word, no apostrophe. Or, if you haven't already, you can find me on YouTube at a channel called Varsity Bookworm. Thank you.